to the Great Loop Radio podcast, brought to you by America's Great Loop Cruisers Association. We're dedicated to sharing Great Loop information and inspiration with those actively cruising, planning for, or dreaming about a Great Loop adventure. I'm Kim Russo. I'm the director of AGLCA. Today, we're going to cover a topic that is very timely, as many of our members who are currently on the loop are approaching the Erie Canal, followed by the Trent-Severn Canal, or perhaps they're going through the Champlain Canal. Regardless of which way you enter the Great Lakes, you're going to be dealing with some locks. So we have invited Jacque and Tsali Bentley to be our guests. They are platinum loopers who are multi-award winners with AGLCA, and they presented on this topic at the very recent Spring Rendezvous. So perfect timing, perfect guests to describe this for you. I'll bring in Jacque and Tsali in just a moment, but first I want to recognize and thank our Admiral sponsors who support AGLCA at the highest level. They are Edward Jones Financial Advisor and Certified Financial Planner Kathy All, Great Loop Yacht Sales, Passage Maker Trawler Fest, Skipper Bob Publications, and Waterway Guide Media. As always, we encourage our listeners and viewers to support these businesses that support the Great Loop. And with the business done, I want to officially welcome Jacque and Tsali Bentley. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you, Kim.
Yeah, it's great to see the two of you. As I said in the intro, you are platinum loopers. You have been past recipients of the True North Harbor Host of the Year Award, and you are the current Ron and Eva Staub Volunteers of the Year. So thank you for volunteering once again and joining me today. I can't think of anybody better to help us learn a little bit more about what to expect from the locks on the Great Loop. So welcome. Go ahead and introduce yourselves beyond that. For those who don't know you already, maybe tell us a little bit about your own Great Loops.
All right.
I'm Jacque Bentley, my husband Sully Bentley, and yes, we completed our 2 loops. The first one in 21-22, the second one in 23-24. So we just finished the second loop this past October. We boat on a Mainship 400. Her name is Compass Rose, and for us, she's been perfect. We've had a great experience doing both of our loops with that. What else do you want to add?
That's good.
All right. Well, let's jump right into it then. Today we're talking about locking. I think the Boy Scout motto of be prepared definitely applies here. And I know I always feel better being prepared going into a lock. And Jacque knows about my lock of tears. Maybe I'll share that a little bit later. But my problem in that lock certainly came down to not being prepared. So tell us about what are the steps to really be prepared as you're getting ready to approach a lock.
Well, in the rendezvous presentation that I did, I basically broke it down into 5 parts: preparation, approach, entering the lock, monitoring once you're in, and exiting. So we'll probably follow that format a little. But what I'd like to maybe start with is actually talking about what you may need material-wise to go into the lock. A lot of locks, I don't know any exceptions in this case, but most lock masters will ask you if you're on deck or if you're outside the cabin to be wearing your PFD, whether it's a vest or whether it's inflatable, whatever it may be, but to be wearing that. We actually both wear ours because we don't know if one of us may call for the other one to go outside. So the rule of thumb is even when guests are on board, everybody wears a PFD when going through the lock. The other item that we talk about being prepared, and that is having a knife on the PFD. I know some people keep it right inside the helm door or whatever it may be, wherever it may be, but we keep ours actually on the PFD itself. Jacque has a knife on hers. I have a knife on mine. And then we also have a whistle. We keep a whistle on both of our PFDs as well. So that's just, to me, the necessities of going into the lock. And then I'm usually at the helm. So Jacque, describe what you mainly have up on the foredeck.
Well, I could probably be sarcastic and say, well, whoever's outside does all the work. But it's not exactly true. Kind of true, not exactly. If they don't get you close to the wall, they have a very specific job to do by doing that. One thing I would say, talking about being prepared with your personal flotation device, your PFD, Sully and I never wear our rings when we're boating and using lines, just for fear of your ring getting caught in a line or something like that. So that's another thing we do, is make sure we don't have our rings on. We definitely have our headsets on with a lanyard. There's been one time that I was pushing off a lock wall and it was kind of slick and it slid forward and the headset came flying off. And thank goodness I had a lanyard attached to my headset so it didn't go in the water. What I do though is, and of course it depends on what type of lock you are going through.
Mm-hmm.
I always wear gloves. Again, that's to help protect your fingers, and plus, particularly those when you start going through the Erie Canal and the Trent Severn Canal, they have a lot of ropes or cables that you have to grab, and they're not exactly pristine clean.
They may be slimy.
Yes, they may be.
So wearing gloves is a good thing for that. The other thing I always have is a boat hook with me.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're going through these locks along the Erie, the Trent Severn, particularly if they're ropes or if they're a cable, you have to put your line behind. How do you get to it? So Sully's very good about bringing the bow of the boat closer to the wall, and I use my boat hook to reach out from the bow of the boat and grab the line there, and then he will bring the stern around to grab the line in the rear as well.
Mm-hmm.
But sort of prepping, just making sure we have our fenders on the side of the boat, and maybe I'm a little over prepared, but I usually do fenders on both sides of the boat. And that's because you never know when you think you're going to be on the starboard side, that lockmaster may tell you to go to port, or the wind may blow you to the other side and you don't mean to be there, but that's where you are. So I always try to be prepared by having both sides of the boat prepared.
Well, and I'll also add the fact that usually Jackie has a set of binoculars up on the foredeck as well. I think once you get more experience, you don't necessarily have to use the binoculars as much, but it may be a call that you want to know, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes as well, what type of mooring attachment that they have in the lock itself. And so the sooner you know that and confirm that with binoculars, the more at ease you are. So I guess it goes back to the Boy Scout motto, just being prepared in all sorts of different avenues just allows less anxiety, less anxiousness, and really a better locking experience.
Yeah, for sure. I always like to know all of the details about what we're going to find once we get in the lock. So you're wearing your PFDs, you're wearing your gloves, you've got your knife, your whistle. And we'll talk a little bit about, I think, what that knife and that whistle might be used for. Hopefully not, but could be used for if needed. So you're all prepared. You've got your fenders out. You're ready to approach the lock. So what's kind of the first step? How do you let the lock operators know that you're ready and waiting to lock through?
Well, and I'll add something to what Sully was saying about being able to know what type of a lock it is.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of publications out there, whether it's Waterway Guide or Alan Wood's Navigation Notes, Active Captain, that a lot of those will tell you, number one, what radio channel that lock will communicate on,
mm-hmm.
and also what type of lock it is. Is it ropes? Is it a pipe that you have to put your line around? Is it a floating bollard? So being prepared by knowing that ahead of time. In fact, the night before when we're doing our routes and we know we're going through several locks,
mm-hmm.
on my, what's it called, my checklist, mm-hmm. I actually write down every lock, every channel that they communicate, because if they're close, they might communicate on different channels if they're close to each other, and what type it is,
mm-hmm.
as well as probably the mile marker that it's at. And then we actually will call, when we get the lock in sight, we will call on the VHF radio. And sometimes we call the night before on the telephone just to find out if there's a lot of traffic mm-hmm. that we need to avoid, just to make it easy for them. The commercial traffic, of course, has priority over us so that we're not in the way. So, but definitely when you see the lock in sight, you call them and let them know that you're ready to approach the lock.
I just reiterate that the fact that particularly the inland river, so not necessarily the, let's say, the canals, but that's where you may call them at night before when you've got a lot of commercial traffic being expected, maybe looking at AIS or whatever. But the rule of thumb is when we have the lock in sight, that is when we're communicating with them on the radio, and again, using Waterway Guide or whatever to determine what channel that is.
And we've actually called them earlier than that, and they say, when you can see me, then call me. So they really don't want you, calling all the time as you're coming down the river.
Now, the caveat to this is that when you get up into the Trent Severn, and we heard Chad talk about it at the rendezvous, they have the blue line, and that's the blue painted wall prior to the lock. And that's really because those lock operators don't really use radios as much. And so they determine if you're going to lock through by you coming up and tying up to the blue wall. And then that signals them that you want to come through. And then you just look at the signals that they give you to proceed through the lock.
Yeah, so and it sounds strange for those of us who are used to the VHF radio, being used to arrange those kinds of things, but it actually works very efficiently.
Yes.
But so just be ready for that in Canada, because they will not be answering the VHF because they're not using it. So that's a good point. As long as, Jackie, we just talked about Waterway Guide and Active Captain and some of the resources to look at so you can be prepared, as we said. Can you just go through some of those different, you talked about floating bollards, which are very common on the inland rivers and those commercial locks. But you talked about cables and pipes and ropes. Just quickly, just kind of tell us what that means to somebody who's never been through a lock and what you do with each of those things.
Well, I tell you what, I'd like to describe them first and then have Jackie talk about how she approaches it.
Perfect.
Particularly up on the upper Hudson, the Erie and the Oswego, and then the Trent Severn, particularly the Erie and the Oswego, you have either lines, cables, or pipes. And this is where binoculars really come into play, because you can pick these out sooner rather than later. The interesting thing is that if it's a line, meaning a rope line that's just over the side of the wall, and it comes down and there's some sort of weight, usually a rubber weight at the bottom, to keep it straight and everything, that is usually seen on the outside of the wall, whereas cables and pipes are seen as insets in the wall because they're more stationary. And so that's what you pick up with a little bit of knowledge and experience, is how you're looking at these locks, whether or not they're lines, cables, or pipes. And so my responsibility when Jackie more or less is taking us in, really, she's talking to me on the headset, and we've determined which side we're going to go on, either port or starboard. She's calling out distances to me as we're approaching the lock, how far off the wall we are through the headset. And that gives me an idea, because if we're tying up on the port side, I don't see that side as well as I do up from my starboard helm on the starboard side. So I rely on her information over the headset to give me those distances off the wall. And then that helps me to guide the rudder or either the thrusters to get her closer, to make sure that she's going to pick up her point. And that's what we talk on the headset. Are we talking about picking up the first rope, second rope, third rope, fourth rope, or pipe, or whatever that number may be? But I'm putting her in position to do that. And if I'm not doing too well, she lets me know about it too.
But it really is on the person who's driving the boat. The better job they can do of getting you close to the wall, the easier time us line handlers are going to have grabbing that pipe or grabbing that rope. But go ahead, and Jackie, tell us what we do with a pipe or cable versus what happens with a rope with a weight on the end.
Okay, so the heavy rope, like I said, is weighted at the bottom. I will take a boat hook. I'm sorry I don't have one. And Sully will sort of swing the bow over, and on all of these types, typically the ropes, the cables, and the pipes, you're going to have two connections. You're going to have one at the bow and you're going to have one at the stern. So he'll pull me over with the bow, and with the boat hook, I can reach out and grab the rope, pull it to me, pull it to the boat, and then I will just wrap it around the cleat. That helps me with a little bit of leverage, that I don't have to work so hard holding onto that line. And then he will swing the stern around, and he will do the same thing with another boat hook. He will grab a line at the back, at the stern of the boat, and hold on.
Right.
Now for the pipes and cables, and like Sully said, those are sort of inset into the wall a little bit. They are secured at the top and the bottom of the wall. And so you have to have a line on your boat. Go around the cleat just like you would any docking line that you have. And then you're going to take the bitter end of that rope, and you're going to wrap it behind the pipe or the cable and bring it back to your boat. Again, on the bow and the stern, you're going to do that on both ends of the boat. The floating bollards.
I'll just interject here. Okay. And that is when we talk about the bow of the boat, we're actually talking about anything from midship to the bow itself. I'm not putting Jackie on the bow pulpit and then trying to put her over on the wall. So she may actually grab this I'll call it the forward line cable or pipe, she may actually grab that a quarter of the way back from the bow, and then we position the boat accordingly there. And when she says that she has that over the headset, that she's secure with that line, pipe, or rope, then I'm putting my stern over against the wall as well, either by thruster, or if I'm a little bit forward, I may actually put the boat in reverse. But I think the most, and I skipped over this accidentally. The most important thing is you go in at idle speed. You go in as slow as you possibly can, but still have the maneuverability to do whatever you need to with your boat. And that is so important. That lockmaster will call you down if he sees you coming in hot, as they say, and even though you think you may be able to slow it down real quick, he may call you out, and that is something you really don't want to be heard on the radio.
Yeah.
So the other type of lock is a floating bollard. And the floating bollard is just like a large metal pin. And you want to put a line around that and bring it back to your boat. And you do it just at the midship. You only need one connection with a floating bollard. So with that one, you'll have a line cleated to your boat. You'll take it around the floating bollard and then bring it back, but don't cleat it off again. And that's always a contentious discussion on the forum is, do you cleat the line back off? And we do not. We do not. We do use the cleat to wrap the line around
the horns
of it, just to help us get some leverage and not have to work so hard.
Yep.
But should something happen in that lock, something gets stuck or whatever, you can release your line much quicker that way.
And I want to comment on that because I have seen it come up recently. And, first of all, yes, use the horn of the cleat for leverage. None of us, whether it's the man, the woman on the boat, has the strength to do it by brute force. True. Use that cleat as leverage. And I have seen women in locks basically swinging from that hanging rope because they hadn't used the cleat, and choice words being exchanged between the couple because it was not going well in that lock. Wrapping it on the cleat, not tying it down, but just around the horn makes all the difference in holding the boat close to the wall. But actually tying it down. So when I see the discussion and some people say that they do tie it to the cleat, we don't. I have always heard that that's a bad idea. I can kind of see how it's possible to do on a floating bollard because the boat is moving with the lines. You really don't have to do as much line adjustment. The bollard is changing with the boat as the level of the water changes. It's moving because it's floating. But on the recreational canals that we're mostly focusing on today, because that's where everyone is headed right now, I feel like that would be super dangerous because you are having to adjust the line. If you've cleated it down and the water level starts to drop, it's not going to take very long before you are running out of line. And that is now so tight you can't uncleat it. That's where the knives come in that you all very kindly mentioned should be on your life jackets. But so, I don't want to give people the impression because some people do it and are effective at it, that it's a good idea in all situations. I think even those people who do that aren't effective at it are probably using it on floating bollards. I can't see how it would work. If you have the hanging rope and you've locked it down to a cleat, or if you have the cable or the pipe, then you are kind of sliding up and down along with it. But just so be aware of that. Once that line starts to tighten, it is next to impossible to untie it, and your boat can end up hanging by that. We don't want to see that. Have you ever had to use the knife to cut the line?
No, but I heard somebody the other day talking about having to do that and said that they barely touched the line, and it was a very loud noise. I've always heard the saying, you can cut it with a butter knife. If it is that tight that you do not have to have a serrated sharp knife, that anything would cut it.
Yeah, apparently it's under a lot of tension. We did have to use the knife once, but we weren't stuck in that way. We were stuck on a floating bollard, and the line was, occasionally we will do, not just run it around the bollard and back, but sometimes we'll do a full turn around the bollard and back because of the way our midships is. It's sometimes with the ones, if they don't have the ears, it's hard to keep it on the bollard if they just kind of have that point. So we had wrapped it around, and somehow in that process, it got stuck upon itself. So the lock was finished transitioning. We were, the doors were open. We were ready to leave and we couldn't leave because the line was actually stuck around the bollard. And of course it was the one line we had just recently replaced for a different reason. So I still have the little end of it as my reward for getting it stuck. It just hangs right there by the Helm station. But so not that kind of emergency situation that it could be. But you also mentioned the whistles that you keep on your PFD. What do you do with the whistle? Is obviously it's an emergency signal, but what's the scenario that you might foresee using that?
I put the whistles on the PFDs after I read an article about a boat in Lake Michigan, and the fellow went overboard, and it took his breath away so much that he couldn't yell with all of his strength, but he did have a whistle, and that's what he kept blowing for the next few hours. It was at night.
Yeah.
And so we just have them on our PFDs all the time. Certainly, if you fall overboard in a lock, I mean, everything's in a tight area there, so you're not floating away per se. But we just always keep them on.
Yeah, you're not floating away, but the water can be very turbulent inside a lock, and I think that's not the place you want to end up in the water. You never want to end up in the water, basically, but that's also not the
That's
ideal
true.
spot. So, all right.
I want to go.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to go back and talk about, because this is a question I had at the that was asked to me at the rendezvous, and that was if you're traveling by two people, and the person on the forward part of the boat grabs that line again on one of the canals, and when I actually leave the helm to go back to secure the line at the stern of the boat, because the person asked me, I've heard you never leave the helm. Well, when I get the boat in position, so where I know Jackie's got one line secured up at the bow, then it's my responsibility to actually leave the helm, go back to the stern, and grab that again, rope, pipe, cable, whatever it may be. But
you brought the boat to a complete stop.
Yes.
Yeah.
The boat is just sitting there when I do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And they do have you turn off the engines in these smaller locks in particular. In the event that there's a lot of wind or something along that line, we've done a lot of these, and Michael is very good at moving from the helm station to the stern to do his part with the lines. But if there is a lot of wind or something along that line, he may not shut the engine off immediately. He may go back. That is the one circumstance where he might cleat off the line while he goes back and shuts down the engines and all that, and then comes back and uncleats it and tends the line while the lock is transitioning. But the engine, we don't have thrusters. The engine is the best way for us to be able to move it towards the wall if we need to. So if he feels like it's possibly going to drift back out before he can get to the stern, he may leave it running just so that he can quickly adjust if he needs to run back up to do that. But so yeah, there is a time when you can kind of cleat it off and leave it there if the lock hasn't started moving yet.
And I'll
Jackie,
go back
you had something too, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'll go back to the bollard. You said, the bollard moves with your boat. That is true until it doesn't. And
100% correct. Yep.
And we've been through probably 200 locks and had never had a bollard get stuck, and then it did. And the scenario on this is because usually I'm the one at the bollard and I don't leave it. But in this scenario, we were having to have someone raft up with us in the lock. So I secured us at the bollard. Sully came back. He took that from me, and I went on the other side of the boat to help tie up or raft up the boat, second boat to us. And when suddenly I heard in the headset, when the water is moving, the bollard stuck. And my first question was, did you get the line off? And because he had not, cleated it down, he had the line around the horn, he was able to get it off very quickly. So, even though we think that the bollards will move with us, you never, ever walk away from them, because it just takes a split second and then they're not moving.
Absolutely. That's a great point. And that is actually, I think, one of the recent ones where someone had to cut a line. It was because the bollard was stuck. So yeah.
And yes, and that person, their knife was inside the boat. That's another reason we keep it right on our life jackets. We don't have to go look for a knife. We have it right there.
Right.
And the other item that I keep on me on my PFD is my handheld VHF radio. And it just so happened I was calling the lock when the bollard did get stuck. I was calling the lock to inform them and ask them to cut the flow. Unfortunately, with that Wilson lock being 100 feet down, the reception of the VHF radio, the handheld, was not that great. So Jackie actually went inside on the console radio. So that's just something to be cognizant of. If you're not getting reception or hearing a voice on the other side, go to your other radio.
Yeah. People ask, they said, "Oh, how often does that happen? Does it get stuck?" And I said, we had done well over 200 locks.
Right.
And it had not happened. So it is a very rare thing for the
very rare
Ballard to get stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's pretty common when you're traveling with a bunch of loopers, you're going to do a series of locks in the day. So the very first one, though, can be a little bit more challenging if there's a group of you. How does everyone decide who's going in the lock and in what order, who's going to what sides? How has that worked out from your experience?
Communication is the key to this whole process. And as long as the lockmaster hasn't given you any instructions yet, we basically talk to the boats. We may know each other, we may not know each other. And so therefore we look for the biggest boat to go in against the wall, and then the smaller boat or light freeboard boat would raft up to them if we're in a rafting up situation.
Which is rare, which is kind of rare.
And we just communicate how far we're going in, and knowing through waterway guide and such, knowing how many ropes or cables are positioned helps you determine where you're going to go in that lock. And so we just communicate and we say, we'll take the furthest one on the port side, or we'll take the furthest one on the starboard side, but please do not go in and take the first one you come to in the lock, because that means everybody's got to go around you, and that's not very pleasant. So definitely go as far as you feel comfortable going into the lock itself.
Larger boats typically can't go to the very, very front pin. The doors, when they swing open, might be too close to a really long boat. Our boat is just a perfect size, 40 feet. We can, when the lock is full, we can get right up to the very first floating bollard or pin and hook on there, and the doors just miss the bow of the boat. So
yeah,
don't stop at the back and take the first one. You want to go up as far as you can.
And then usually when you exit normally the same way, unless you've communicated with the boat next to you. And I always do it. If there's two boats in there side by side, one on the port wall, one on the starboard wall, I will try to get that person's attention and say, would you like to go in front of me, or can I go in front of you? At least, again, communication's the key to just helping things flow smoothly.
And I guess the other thing to say on that is, just because you might be in a fast boat, don't think you need to get out and zoom ahead, because these locks, many of them, you may be going through 4, 8 locks a day. Who knows? I mean, there's a lot of locks, just one right after the other. So they want you to go through together as much as you can. So just, cool your jets and everybody go together.
Yeah, the phrase I heard is, you're only going to make it through those locks as fast as the slowest boat is going.
Exactly.
So there's no point to burn a lot of fuel to get from one to the next, because most likely that lockmaster knows exactly how many boats went through the previous lock, and you'll be waiting for whatever that slowest boat might be. So, you mentioned everyone's kind of talking through the process of getting in. You mentioned obviously that you're going to want to go all the way to the front of the lock so that everyone has a room to enter behind you if you're first. Any other tips for as you're entering? Any other courtesy things for the entry or the exit?
I would say, again, slow, idle speed. But yeah, Jackie brings up a good point, and that is, watch the flags. Watch the flags, which way they're blowing, because that gives you an idea of whether that wind is going to maybe be pushing you against the wall, or maybe trying to keep you off the wall as well. And then also, all these locks have an indicator of when to go into the chamber. And so it's either a green light, the red light, and then it turns green. Maybe you hear a horn. But again, rely on the resources like Waterway Guide to educate yourself before you get there, so to know what you're going to be hearing for or looking for. And again, that's where these binoculars come into play as well.
Yeah. And then again, there's a signal before you are cleared to leave the lock, correct?
Absolutely. We basically say that we do not untie the boat until we hear the horn.
Hmm.
And that's when the doors are fully open. And if you're anywhere near the front of the lock, the forward part of the lock, and when those doors are basically opening back up, they're pushing a lot of water. So if there's any stumps or deadheads or anything in that area, just watch the water around your boat, just so it's not underneath your props when you start to leave.
Let's take a quick break and play a message from one of our sponsors. When we come back, I just want to touch a little bit more on communication with the lockmaster during this process. And then we'll just talk about any other tips that you might have along the way. So we'll be back in a moment. Embark on the journey of a lifetime with the new Leopard 40 Power Cat, the ideal companion for exploring America's Great Loop. Enjoy unparalleled comfort and fuel efficiency as you navigate this iconic waterway. Whether you're a seasoned cruiser or a first-time adventurer, the Leopard 40 Power Cat offers the ultimate in travel ease and luxury. It's time to set sail on your dream voyage, and it all starts with the Leopard 40 Power Cat. Discover a new level of exploration and embark on an unforgettable experience. Contact us today and make your Great Loop adventure a reality. www.leopardcatamarans.com. Nestled along the serene shores of the Hudson River, Troy Downtown Marina offers more than just dock space. It's a gateway to waterfront bliss. Whether you're a seasoned boater or seeking a scenic getaway, our marina offers the perfect escape. Our pet-friendly marina offers up to 400 feet of alongside dockage, available for any size vessel with approach depths of 16 plus feet. We also offer great amenities including diesel and gas, a variety of power options, pump out, parking, and on-site restrooms and showers. Nearby, you'll find restaurants and bars, shops, and a town full of wonderful history and architecture. Troy Downtown Marina, the ultimate waterfront experience awaits. Visit us at troymarina.com. We're back on the Great Loop Radio podcast. Today we're talking about the process of locking. And Platinum Loopers Jackie and Tsali Bentley, who many of you know, are with us today to walk us through this process. They just presented on this a few weeks ago at the Spring Rendezvous. So one of the things I don't think we really touched on is, we talked about radioing the lockmaster unless you're in Canada, but when the lock is in sight. But we didn't really talk so much about what communication you're doing ongoing as you enter the lock and exit the lock. So what are the things that you should be saying on that radio to the lockmaster during this process?
The thing I would say is, if you're alone, certainly you call the lockmaster when you have them in sight. But a lot of times you might be traveling with a group of 6, 8, 10 other boats, and they kind of appreciate it if you were organized in your group, so that you're only making one call to them to say we're ready to approach the lock. So that would be my first tip: is if you have a group, be organized enough to not have to call him with every single boat. Mm-hmm. But once you get inside, once you've secured your boat to the wall, whether it's through lines or cables or a bollard, we definitely radio the lockmaster again to say we are secure. Compass rose is secure, so that he knows.
And then when we leave, as soon as we clear the doors, we let the lockmaster know that we've cleared, and we just tell him thank you. We appreciate lift up or the lockdown, whatever it may be. Again, just being courteous to him or her is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, Jackie, you mentioned, not leaving the bollard or continuing to tend the line through the entire transition of the lock. Any tips on what you're doing during that time, or what you might be looking for as the water is either dropping or raising?
Well, certainly on a floating bollard is to see if it's really floating. Or if it's going down. Mm-hmm. That's the main thing. Is it coming up with you, or is it going down with you? If it is stuck, that is not a good situation. And we did see, I will say that we did witness another boat one time who had a bollard get stuck on the way down a 40-foot lock. At about a third or halfway down, it stuck. They were monitoring. They saw it right away, were able to get their lines off. And the lockmaster just said, "Are you okay? Why don't you just float?" And so they did not have to try to move to another bollard or anything like that. They just tried to slow the water down, and they floated all the way down without being tied to the wall. Mm-hmm. But I always, when I'm out there, whether it's, just making sure that if it's a line that I'm holding wrapped around the horns of the boat. If we're going down, I'm releasing that line, and letting it out little by little so that it doesn't get taut. Or if we're going up, I don't want it drooping down into the water. So I'm just pulling it in constantly, making sure that the line is a good tension. And the same thing around, if you're wrapped around a pipe or a cable, you want to make sure that because you're sliding up the back side of that cable or pipe, you want to make sure that it doesn't get snagged on anything. You want that it's sliding up and down smoothly.
Right. So
it's very,
go
I
ahead,
was going to
Sully.
say, it's just very important to stay very much aware of your surroundings. And even other boats, the boat maybe that's tied up but in front of you or behind you, just to be aware of everything. And then we also look at our fenders, because sometimes how we have our fenders positioned when we come into the lock may not be the most ideal place when we're going up or down the wall. And so we will relocate the fenders if we need to.
We typically have the vertical fenders on the side of the boat, and we do have 2 ball fenders. And the ball fender I put just where the bow of the boat begins to turn in. That helps to keep it sort of steady. And then on our swim platform, we also keep our dinghy. I will take the second ball fender and put just outside the swim platform to keep it off the wall so that the propeller of the dinghy engine is not hitting the wall. So that's typically what we do.
Yeah, those are great tips. Speaking of fenders, and we are going to make available Tsali and Jackie's handout from this session in the Spring Rendezvous. So there'll be a link for members to click from the YouTube video, and also in the episode notes if you're consuming this as an actual podcast. So members of AGLCA will be able to get to that. One of the things on that handout, of course, is that after you've locked through, storing the fenders back in their proper places to keep everything neat and tidy. But we regularly see pictures posted to social media, and by now y'all probably know social media is not always my favorite place. And it never failed that somebody will post a picture of a boat with those fenders out while they're underway. And somebody else will call them out as a rookie mistake for leaving their fenders out. But it's actually pretty common in certain parts of the loop, at least for the perch. Tell us what Compass Rose does with the fenders. I think you know what I'm talking about, but tell us your method for that.
And I'm going to let Jackie answer because she's out there on the deck.
So, our fenders, I never take my fenders and store them in some little holder or anything like that. We always just pull up the loose end of the fender and tie it back up to the rail so that the fenders hang horizontally. All the time we're moving, you will see our fenders are hanging horizontally off the rail. But if you're going through lock after lock after lock, example, the Erie Canal, the Trent Severn Waterway, the Tinton Waterway, you've got so many locks in one day. I might pull them up, but if it's only a few miles, they're still hanging down. They're not dragging in the water, but they are still over the side of the boat for sure.
It doesn't make for a good picture when someone's on the side and they post it on social media later that, this boat came by, and then you see the fenders as you're talking about, Kim.
Okay. But, so here's my New York tip for all of you who are headed to New York. Okay. When you are preparing the day you want to have your picture made in front of the Statue of Liberty, the moment you leave your dock, don't tie your fenders up like I do horizontally. Absolutely take them off your boat, hide them away, because when you get that picture with the Statue of Liberty, you don't want fenders everywhere. So that
is a great point. Yep. And the bottom line is it is okay to leave your fenders down if you're going through lock after lock after lock that day. So just wanted to make sure that was clear. So I mentioned the lock of tears, and I will tell what that is because I know Jackie gave me a good ribbing about this. But so the first lock that you'll encounter as you're coming up the Hudson is not actually on the Erie Canal. So if you are not prepared for that, the first lock on the Erie Canal is actually lock 2 at Waterford. But the Federal lock in Troy is actually before you get to the Erie Canal. So completely on me. I was unprepared. Not our first lock ever, but the first one in a while since the Dismal Swamp probably. So all of a sudden there was a lock coming. I was flustered. I did not know what kind of, whether it was cables, because I hadn't looked it up. Did the best I could to prepare, but felt completely inept at the whole thing. And my frustrated reaction was just for the tears to start to roll. Michael didn't know what to do. And because of, I mean, he knew what to do with the locking. He's done hundreds of locks without me. He didn't know what to do with me. So he just kind of wanted me out of the way so he could get us through the lock. And that right then and there, I knew I would never be unprepared for another lock, because I would be looking at the entire part of the day, even if I thought there were no locks coming up. So that will forever be known. The Federal Lock at Troy, Michael will always call that the lock of tears. I've earned that. I own it. It's where we are.
Well, when we came through there last year, Kim, we weren't much different. We hadn't been through a lock in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And we were traveling alone. We were definitely behind the crowd. We were, it was kind of late in July when we were heading through there, but it was windy. We were traveling alone that day, and we got in there, and gosh, did we blow 90 degrees? Almost. I mean, it was, we had a rough day there too. So that one was
not just me then. Good.
No.
Glad to hear it. Well, I think we've shared a lot of tips today. This is the topic that we could talk about probably for days on end, because every lock is just a little bit different. Every boat is just a little bit different on where your cleats are and what the whole configuration is for the fenders. So some of it is really just, learning by doing, but I think you've really given us a great head start, Jackie and Sully, for the people who are approaching their first locks there on the Erie Canal. So thank you for joining me today. Greatly appreciated.
Well, thank you, Kim. Appreciate it.
And thanks to everyone who's watched or listened today. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Great Loop Radio podcast. Until then, safe cruising.